Hey, this is Kevin from Kevin's Barbecue Joints, and I am really excited to bring you this episode. It is with Professor Jeff Savell from Texas A&M University in College Station. I I've been bugging Jeff for easily a year and a half, and I'm not the best at doing these podcasts, and I stutter and stammer and try to edit those out, and I laugh a lot and laugh in strange places, but like right here. But if anything, I'm persistent, and I know when I have a good story or I have something that I want to share with you guys, and have you learn more, and in turn I learn more. I'm all for it, and so I've been bugging him, and I finally got him to sit down. And this one is great. He is in the Department of Animal Science, more specifically meat science, and we get into all about the meat science program. If you're listening to this before you go into college, I think this would be a great primer for you. And there's also a lot of extension programs, and especially I was curious about Camp Brisket and Barbecue Summer Camp, how those came about, as well as what they're all about, and how do you get a chance to go to those. And we go into detail on those, and it's going to take like it took me. I signed up, and then you put in a lottery system, because at first people were just, it was selling out so quickly that no one got a chance. So if you've been trying for many years, you should get a chance. So I will stop now, and I will give you a chance to listen to Professor Jeff Savell discuss everything with me. You're going to enjoy this. And this episode is brought to you by The Smoke Sheet. The Smoke Sheet is a barbecue newsletter that arrives in your email box every Wednesday. Just sign up at bbqnewsletter.com. It's bbqnewsletter.com. Super easy to sign up. It is chock full of information. At the beginning, there's original content, either Ryan Cooper, who is at BBQ Tourist, or Sean Ludwig, who is at NYC BBQ. The two of them travel a lot, and they go to a lot of barbecue joints and regions of barbecue. So there's usually either original content from those travels, or from a guest person, or on a subject like whole hog or barbecue sauces or something specific. There's always at the beginning, and then there's barbecue news, and there's always barbecue news I didn't know about. There was this week there was something about Adam Perry Lang opening a restaurant in Yountville, which is near the French Laundry, and I no idea. I had no idea. So there's always news that you didn't know about, barbecue restaurant openings and closures, and things happening in the barbecue world, the barbecue recipe of the week, information on all the barbecue events that are coming up for a month and a half. So that way you can plan ahead. Links to podcasts like this and YouTube stuff, and there's so much information. It's definitely worth getting. You'll definitely utilize it for sure. It'll be a good tool for you. And it also keeps you up to date on what's going on in the barbecue world, because if anything, it's important to be informed. Again, this is available at bbqnewsletter.com. That's bbqnewsletter.com. The Smoke Sheet is barbecue news worth consuming. And hey, if you're just listening to this as a podcast, I have a YouTube version of this at youtube.com/Kevin's BBQ Joints, with tons more stuff, more content in the YouTube channel. So check that out. If you're checking this out on YouTube, then that is totally redundant. I apologize. I have a website at kevinsbbqjoints.com with tons more content, connections to all my podcasts, YouTube stuff, as well as tons of lists. I have a list that I work on with Abe Delgado from the I Crush Barbecue Show, a list of all the barbecue pop-ups and underground spots in Los Angeles on a weekly basis. So that's worth checking out. Social media, Kevin's BBQ Joints, at Kevin's BBQ Joints, I guess you would say. But thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Send me a message. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Enjoy this. Good morning, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, and I'm glad we've connected now. What I would like to do is I'd like to hear about how you got to where you are today, but then also talk a lot about the Texas A&M Meat Science program.
Well, let me back up. So we're in the Department of Animal Science.
Animal Science, that's what it is. Okay.
And so, in the Department of Animal Science has all the things that deal with reproduction and genetics and nutrition. We have an equine group that deals with all the horse stuff like that.
Wow.
And then the meat science component of that. And so that's been a long component here at A&M. In fact, I think the first course taught in meats goes back to 1926.
Wow.
And it was called Farm Meats. It was designed to teach the boys. Remember, A&M was all men up in the 60s. And it was all military.
Okay.
And so it was to teach young men how to go back to the farm and put up the pork, put up beef and all that for that. And, of course, it's transitioned into much more than that now because of the changes. And I teach that class. I've been teaching that this fall 37 years.
37 years? Wow.
37 years. So I'm going to make a career out of that one of these days.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty soon you'll be able to make a career out of it. Now but you also went to Texas A&M, right?
Yes. Yes. So I came here, transferred here in 1972 as a sophomore and finished my undergraduate degree. I was on the meat judging team. That was where I got a lot of exposure to the meat industry, and we traveled around, went to plants all over the United States
Oh, interesting.
and competed. And then I went to graduate school. I coached a meat judging team. So I had a lot of great people that, were involved in that. And then I got a PhD and intended to go somewhere else after I got through. And there happened to be a job that opened up an extension, and did that for a couple of years. And those are the same jobs that you'll see my colleague Davey Griffin and Dan Hell do. And so statewide type things where it's in the meat science area. And then a teaching job came open in 1979, and I was lucky to get that, and that's what I've been in ever since. I kind of went up through the ranks in that. So
Yeah,
I
awesome.
never intended to be here and stay and do that, but it's been kind of a blessing to be able to spend a career both as a student and then in academic career here at Texas A&M.
And you've gotten a chance to really get firsthand see how things have changed. Did you grow up in Texas?
Yes. I grew up in a town called Ferris, which is just south of Dallas.
Okay.
And so about 20 miles from downtown Dallas, but it was in a rural area. And so I grew up in a small, about 2,000 person town, more agriculture. Either people worked in Dallas, drove back and forth each day, and then we had a lot of farmers around there. And so my dad was involved in agriculture. He worked cotton gin, grain elevators, hauled hay, hauled cotton, all those kinds of things. So, and then I was active in FFA when I was in school. So I raised sheep, I raised cattle, I showed heifers, showed steers, and things like that, and got involved in that. And that's where we did a lot of the judging, the livestock judging, the meat judging, all those kinds of things, and got my interest. Remember the first time we came down to A&M, my ag teacher was an old ag, a class of 30-something, and he brought us down, all the boys down to come to a practice judging contest in 1968. I remember pulling up to the corner of what's Texas and University Avenue, and he said, "Boys, that's Texas A&M." And of course, it doesn't look anything like it does now, but I said, "My gosh, that's a great looking place. I wonder if I can ever go there." And then,
Oh, wow.
and 50 years later, and of course, that's my career here, so it's kind of interesting. That was when I was 14 when I did that.
Wow. And then you've spent a good portion of your life there. Now moving because you're in a town of 2,000, my graduating class here where I live in Los Angeles outside, it was 4,000 people. Well, no, it was 1,800 people was my graduating class. 4,000 kids went to my high school, which is, so it's a lot of people listening to this or watching this. I have a hard time probably thinking of what it's like to grow up in a town of 2,000, or would you call that a city of 2,000 or a town?
Well, I would call it a town.
Right.
But you can kind of argue on all those things, and it's interesting in living all the time in Texas. Of course, I get students. The majority of students we get today come in, and they're from the metropolitan areas, and urban areas, and so they're from around Dallas-Fort Worth, they're from around Houston, they're from around San Antonio, Austin, and then we get the smaller communities there. And somebody, I gave a talk a couple of years ago that was dealing with, because I've taught baby boomers and I've taught millennials. I mean, I've taught the whole range of my career, and so it was kind of like how have all these changed? And I said, well, here's one of the things. It's kind of like that old story about why do you rob banks, and that's where the money is. Well, why do you teach so many students that are from suburban areas? Well, that's where the people are.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes sense that you don't have a tremendous number of students who come from the suburban, you think about Texas. I mean, we got the big, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio. I mean, those are big top 10 cities in the United States. And so we got all these people that come. But in the other way, we also have people that come from rural areas. They'll come from small towns, and they get here, and it's like, oh my gosh, I got 200 people in class, and I didn't have 200 people in my high school. So you get the whole mix of things, but it's fun too. We got about 65 66,000 students here at A&M.
And how many people are in your program?
Well, then it
Roughly.
depends on how you count it. So we have, when we think about it, we have about 1,100 students that are in the Department of Science, but they're coming through to get degrees in this, and a lot of them want to be veterinarians. They'll apply. We get students who want to go to med school. We got students who want to go in, production ag. We've got all kinds of folks that go, come and go on that. When we get down into the meat science area, we have about 14 faculty members, and we have about 30 graduate students. So when we kind of think about the emphasis area, we'd have a couple hundred grad students in the department. We'd have about 30 of them there. And so working with me directly, we usually have about 10 grad students, and they're involved in all the programs, including anything we do in the barbecue area, they get involved.
If you were going to Texas A&M and in your program, would you be going to have in mind probably to be an inspector? Is that something that a lot of people, or to maybe run a plant, or to?
If you look right now, and again, I'll do the grad student because it's easier to kind of figure out a career path for those. Our grad students right now, probably the number one place that they work is Tyson Foods, and they work in research and development. Is that, and probably number two is HEB, which is big.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
And again, kind of research and development, quality assurance. Cargill would be a big employer of that. Cryovac, which is a big packaging company that is owned by Sealed Air, the people that make bubble wrap. They've got, you think about all this meat that's vacuum packaged.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they have a whole group. So I've got a whole group of people that work there. Got people work at Walmart, Sam's Club, all these places, and they're in key places. And then after that, it kind of breaks up. And I've got a lot of people in academia too. Mm-hmm. Got a lot of professors that are in universities, land-grant universities around the country that have trained with me and trained with our program too. So I think when I look at it, I've got about my grad students, at least the PhDs, about half are in university, government, USDA kinds of research labs.
That makes sense, yeah.
And then the other half are in some kind of industry kind of setting and kind of research and development, technical services, things like that.
And that's an industry that is that, would you say that's a booming industry, or an industry that say someone's way before, because I'd like to talk about people that have missed the chance to, like, they've already graduated from, or they already maybe have their master's degree. You guys have extension programs that you can to learn additional things, or a grad program, like you said, which would help them get to that path. But is this a career path that you feel like it's still a growing career path for a lot of people?
It's still growing. And so we end up, we never have problems placing students. Mm-hmm. So, then the big challenge is, go here versus somewhere else. But there's no unemployed folks with ours, and usually they have 2 or 3 job offers when they get out. And so, again, you think about the big corporate world of those guys, and those are big, protein producers, and so there's just lots of opportunities there. And so it's been very good in that. And a lot of people, I'll talk to people and they'll say, meat science, what's that? I said, you eat meat? Well, yeah. Well, somebody's got to figure out how to get it there. Mm-hmm. It's all the production of it, it's the processing, it's the packaging, it's the distribution, it's the grading, inspection.
So much.
And I always tell my students when, I always say, we're not trying to train you. I'm talking about undergraduate students now. I always say, we're not trying to train you to be a butcher. But the fact that you've gone through this, you'll never go to the grocery store and look at that meat the same way. You'll understand the complexity that it takes to get it from the hoof all the way down to the retail package. And you'll have, much better appreciation of that. And we probably all need a good dose of that.
I think so. No, I think we all do. For almost everything that we do consume, but I think especially meats.
Yeah.
With the meat science program, are there butchering classes?
Well, we don't have anything that, let me back up. The class that I teach, I told you, it's been around since the 1920s. It's Animal Science 307. And that one we do hands-on. And so the students have the opportunity to go through and slaughter beef, pork, and lamb, mm-hmm. and be able to grade beef, pork, and lamb, and be able to cut those carcasses up. And then for the pork, they're able to take the hams and make those into processed hams. And then we have some labs and sausage manufacturing and things like that. They have that, but it's a one-time deal. It's not anything where it's like a trade school type thing. And that's what I always tell them. It's kind of like you come and you still have the opportunity to do hands-on instruction. where a lot of universities have moved away from that and just show video, kind of thing like that. Now, we do have, when you talk about extension, so we do have programs like Beef 101. So Beef 101
Yeah, I
is,
wanted to talk about that.
this is the 30th year of that. It started at a time when our first class we did, Texas Beef Council, well, back up, the National Checkoff Program had just been passed for beef. And so the one that that you see, beef, it's what's for dinner and all that, that was kind of the 1980s. And so in order to collect the money at each of the states, you had to have a qualified beef council. Texas didn't have one at that time. There were a lot of states that had those. California had one for a long time. I remember working with the California Beef Council back in the early 80s and things like that. So we had all this group of people who started working, but their background was not meats or beef. It was all in accounting or advertising, promotion, things like that. So they said, can you do some program for us that would give the opportunity to, do some hands-on? So we designed one. We called it Beef 101, everything you want to know about beef, but we're afraid to ask, and it's still coming. And so we had this group, and, we showed them, live animals, and we evaluated them, slaughtered them, brought the carcasses in and suited them up and all the safety gear, and we worked with them, and they cut up a side of beef in groups of 3 or 4 at a time. So that was kind of May in 1989, and next year came along and said, this is pretty good, but we talked to some friends of ours in New Mexico at the Beef Council. They'd like to come over, and we said, okay, well, they'll do enough. And then next year there's some other group, and it was all word of mouth. And this is pre-internet. I mean, there's nothing going on. There's nothing that you could learn about this other than just kind of word of mouth. And then somewhere in here we had a group one time that came in. First started having it, and then it kind of spread. And there was somebody that was a food writer that came in, and all of a sudden all the New Orleans guys showed up. And it was all the Brennan bunch. I mean, all that, those guys.
Oh, yeah.
They all showed up over here and started doing it. And then as time went by, instead of doing one a year, we started doing like a couple a year. We're now either doing 3 or 4 a year, and they sell out very fast. And so it's a 3-day program or 2.5. And so it's open to anybody. Anybody can sign up for that. I would encourage anybody to like that. And we've had people come from all over the world. We've had people, every corner of the world we've had people. We had a group one time from Egypt, and they were doing, and you think about this because Egypt's a big beef-eating group. So it was Egyptians, and they had people from like Cairo here, but they also had a group of their family that were in like Atlanta. And so they were all this export business. And so, you had
interesting.
So there's all kinds of stories about folks that have come. So that one, you come in the first day, you look at live animals, we do evaluation, talk about beef. And most folks we got, we'll have somebody, I work for this company, but I've been working in the turkey side, and I need to know something about this. Or my customers asking about stuff, I don't know what that is. I'm just trying to get some more experience. We look at the live animals, evaluate them, and then we bring them to a campus, and they're harvested at the Rosenthal Center. They get to watch that. They don't do it, but they get to watch the process. And then they do some more activity on grading, inspection, and things like that. Cooled overnight. Then the next day, we suit up everybody, and they spend the whole day cutting the side of it.
Oh, man.
And that works out real well. And then the next day, we do a sensory evaluation, different things. Everybody wants to know about wet age, dry age, age, short age, grass-fed, grain-fed, all those things. So,
is that the one where you had all the samples? Was this the last time? I think I saw a photo from somebody, and you had a bunch of different types, and then people tried them and kind of...
Right, yes, yeah. And then we kind of do a little wrap-up. And so that one, is real good, and it's been one of our longest running programs that we have.
So do they sign up for that on the Texas A&M website? Is it specifically in the meat science section? Is that...
Well, I think if you go to the meat.tanu.edu, there's a place over there for some links, and it should get you to Beef 101. And then it's registered through some other, through the department. But anyway, there's places you can go register. It's like online.
How far in advance do you think, like, when's the next one coming up, and when do you have to apply for it?
December. We've already got people in there. So, and it's capped at 40. And part of that is because it's hands-on, you can only get about 40 people in that.
Makes
so
sense.
It's about, it's groups of 4 or 5 that are coming. And sometimes we'll have people that'll come from the same company, and so we'll have them in a group, or somebody will be there as an individual. We just kind of match them up, but it really works out. I think early days of that was so interesting. We had people that again come from all walks of life, and all of a sudden it was this bonding experience.
Oh yeah,
You're doing something that's so different from anything that most folks have done, that they come out of there and you've known people for years, and it's I remember coming to B101 back in the day, and I'm so grateful for that experience. So again, I think the power of hands-on is so important in everything you do, and anytime you can build that into a program is very, very important.
no, that's great. Now so there are still spaces available for December, correct?
Yes, yes.
So I'll put links to all that, and I'm going to try myself to sign up for that. And how much is that this year?
Oh, I don't know. It's about $500 or $600.
Okay.
I don't show up to help. I don't know.
It's around that. Yeah, I just wondered roughly. It's not $10.
No, no.
Just so people are like, oh, it's $25. I'll sign up.
Yeah,
It's a real course. It's something that costs.
it's a real course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then this transition then to the brisket camp, and then there's also barbecue summer camp. How did those come about? And when did those start?
Okay, so let me back up because I got to get you into the.
Okay, perfect. This is great. Yeah.
So I hope you have plenty of time.
I have plenty of time, and I edit these too. So if we.
Okay, all right. So we 10 years ago this spring. So back about February, March, and I still have the chain of the emails that came in, and why I responded to it, I don't know. But we got an email from, I think it was the faculty senate, and they were looking for small section classes to put students in, freshmen specifically. They were calling first year seminars. Okay. And they didn't really care what they were on. They just wanted groups of 10 to 15 students in, and they were trying to recruit professors to help teach these. So again, you think about the volume of emails we get, especially today. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff comes in, and why I clicked on that one, why I read it, I don't know. And so I read it in this 2009, so it's 10 years ago, and they said, well, in 2008, they'd offered a handful of these classes, and they had a list of them, and it was about 4 or 5 of them, but one of them was on baseball. And I looked at it and I said, gosh, if you can teach a class at A&M on baseball, maybe you ought to be able to teach one on something like barbecue. And I don't know why it even stuck in my mind. But so I contacted my colleague, Ray Riley, and Ray's the manager of the Rosenthal Center, and I said, are you interested in doing something like this? And I don't know. I said, well, let's put in a proposal. And so it was just a quick kind of 2-page proposal, just to, list of what you would do. Again, it's 1 hour a week. It's nothing supposed to be, very much. And I thought, well, we've got a real good book that I bought, about 5 years before that, which is called Legends of Texas Barbecue by Rob Walsh. And so I bought that book, and in fact, my wife and I were out doing something, and we were in the San Marcos area, and I ran into like a Harry and David's little store. Yeah. And she's in there doing something, and I look over there, and there's this stack of books. And that's the only books in the store.
Was Rob Walsh's book?
It was Rob Walsh's book. There's a stack of them over there, and I picked one of those up and, looked at it and bought it and kind of read through it. And, essentially because at that time, in still the way Rob probably writes, is there's a lot of stories about stuff, and then there'd be some recipes. So it wasn't just a recipe book. It was kind of like a little bit about here's the background. And, oh, by the way, here's one of their recipes for this joint, this barbecue place, what it was, and that's what he's done in all his writing. That's kind of, I'm gonna say that's March maybe. We get it approved, I guess it was a surprise, and so we got that. And so then about April or May, I get this email from Rob Walsh. and he says, hey, I'm Rob Walsh, I'm a food writer, and I'm doing a story on fajitas. I need to know something about fajitas and all that stuff. And so I quickly sent him back, I know who you are, I got you. We're going to use it for this freshman class and things like that. So Rob comes up to campus. He was living in Houston at the time, and we had him come up, and we helped him on his story for fajitas. He ended up coming to a B101 we had in May.
Oh, wow.
He was still a food writer. He was still a food writer for the Houston Press. Okay. So he was still in that kind of food critic kind of mode on that deal, and still wearing his sunglasses everywhere, and trying to be incognito.
Yeah, I remember. I've talked to people about how he was very discreet, almost like Jonathan Gold, hiding himself. Yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway, even when we took pictures of the class, he had his sunshades on and kind of was hiding behind people and things like that. And so then he wrote that, and I think his style was you would go write an article about something for the paper. It would have some recipes, and then he would excerpt that, and that became his book. So that was the next Tex-Mex grill book or something like that. That story about fajitas is all in that. And so at that time, then he said, there's a group down in the South called Southern Foodways Alliance. Do you know anything about it? I said, I don't know anything about that. And he said, well, they're really good. He said they're trying to kind of bridge the racial divide that you have in the South. And part of that way to help do that is food.
Mm-hmm.
It cuts across cultures. Food cuts, there's no, it's the great equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter your upbringing, doesn't matter anything like that we can celebrate the food. You don't have to be rich, poor, anything like that. There's something magical about food. And bringing people to the table, that almost has a religious kind of connotation.
It does, yeah.
And so I think that's why there's so many biblical references to being at the table together.
For sure. Oh, without a doubt.
He said Texas is different. He said Texas is in the South, but it's not the South. And he said we really need to have one that's really kind of for Texas. I said I don't understand any of this stuff. He said,
yeah, what are you saying?
So he said this. We need to have something that would be like Foodways Texas or Texas Foodways, something like that. And I said, what all they do? He said, they do oral histories and they do all these kinds of things and symposia and all this stuff that would sound history-like type things. And I said, there's people who teach history over here, but I don't know anything about it. I know they teach, I took history classes, but the type of stuff you're talking about, I don't know if we have anything. He said, one thing about A&M over in our group, it's all ag, it's all commodity. It's beef, pork, it's cotton, it's all that kind of stuff. He said, well, let's talk more about it. And so that's 2009, 2010. He convinced me, said, let's host a meeting and see if we need to be able to pull, some people. So I invited a whole bunch of people to come to campus. We said we had hosted, so we hosted, I think it may have been the summer of 2010, the inaugural event just to see if there would be a group. And I think there were 50 people that showed up. That's where I met Daniel Bond.
Oh, wow.
Daniel was here, that's still pre-Texas Monthly. I mean, he was still doing his blog. So there were chefs and there were people that were, food writers, there were food historians, all kinds of folks there. So we kind of got it founded, but it's like, where's this thing going to be, in that? So long and short of it, after getting founded and kind of getting it started, and then eventually what happened, it became housed at the University of Texas at Austin in the American Studies program. Of course, now Marvin Bindley is involved as the executive director. And so we kid that is one of the few things that the Aggies and Longhorns can come together on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that works out real well that you've got a program where that's their spiritual gift is to be able to do the oral histories and all that kind of stuff. And then, we can help out with the subject matter stuff. So right after that was formed, and that gets us up to 2011, which would be the start of the barbecue summer camp. They said, well, one of the things that makes Southern Foodways Alliance really good is that they have symposia,
which are amazing, yeah.
And said, do you have anything? Well, we've got this barbecue class that we started. So we started that in 2009, and Rob came up and helped us, came up and lectured. We've been using his book all these years. And so we're still having this conversation, all that. I said, we could do something like a barbecue, deal. And so we came up with the concept of barbecue summer camp.
Okay. So
that was in 2011. Put it out to, sent out emails and got a pretty good sized group. It took a little bit, but, it didn't sell out immediately like any of this stuff does now. But Greg Morago from the Houston Chronicle came up and wrote up about it. And from that point forward, it just became more viral, if there's such a term, on that. And so it had a big spread. And then, we started getting these calls about this. And then we also had, I think later on, they repurposed that into a San Antonio paper, and it got, even more phone calls and email chatter and things like that. So we did that for a couple of years. And then it was like, well, let's do another one. And said, well, maybe we have a barbecue winter camp. And then go, what would you do? Well, you still do brisket, you do pulled pork, you do all that. And be like, oh, that doesn't make sense. There's a different time of year to do that. And so we said, look, the hardest thing to do is brisket.
Mm-hmm.
It's the challenge. Everybody can do pulled pork. Not everybody can do brisket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest questions we have, all that. And so we said, well, how about something like Camp Brisket? And I will admit that I stole that name. It wasn't that I stole Camp Brisket, but I'd seen Camp Bacon somewhere, and I just thought that was a sexy name to have. And so we named it Camp Brisket and did that in 2013. And of course, then you had the logical folks that had been at barbecue summer camp. They showed up. And then we started having all these pit masters, and we invited them.
Yeah, when did that start?
Well, that was really, I guess, on that one. I'm trying to remember back on barbecue summer camp who we would have had at pit masters. I need to go back and look. We've always had Brian Bracewell. I know you've interviewed Brian. Brian's always come over and
from Southside Market, yeah.
Southside Market.
And he went to school there. He went to grad school there.
Yeah, he was an undergraduate, worked at the Rosenthal Center, and he was on our judging teams, and he was very active as one of our students. So somewhere there, we probably had some people helping out. I'd probably need to go back and look at some of that, kind of see the evolution, at least in barbecue summer camp. But barbecue summer camp now, we have a panel that's on wood and smoke. And so we have some pit masters, help out on that. We also have one on pit design, pit maintenance. And so, of course, those have grown now to where we've got a whole bunch of folks. So Kerry Bexley comes over from Snow's Barbecue now. Even though they're up on Saturdays, they'll come over on Friday and help out on that.
I saw that, yeah.
And so somewhere in here, A&M was involved with Texas Monthly doing a sponsorship of the barbecue festival.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about big A&M. I'm talking about, not us at the low level.
The school itself.
And big bucks and doing all that promotion. Of course, they asked us to be involved with it because we were kind of the face of barbecue as it was going. So we started going over to the barbecue festival and meeting people. And it wasn't, getting there early enough to go around and meet all the pit masters. And so all of a sudden we're meeting people that we had read about and all that, and they'd read about us. And so it was kind of doing these crazy things. And then Houston comes up with one. And then Chris Reed and Michael Former started the Houston Barbecue Festival and said, hey, why don't y'all come down there and come to that and help out, or, come do it. So we now do that and bring a ton of students go down there and they eat like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's them the chance to be involved in that.
But it's a way to intertwine it.
Yeah. And then I think it's 2014. I've got it down in my contacts. I think I met Russell Regals from Regals Barbecue.
Oh, that's so great.
And I think what was interesting is he was, hi, I'm Jeff Savell, A&M, something, had a business card, kind of handing out like your salesman or something like that. And Russell, I said, you pronounce your last name Regal? He said, yes, I do. And he said, you got it right. I said, well, because my name's difficult to pronounce and is mispronounced a lot, I don't know if it's pride, I care about trying to pronounce people's names correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was one of those things that I don't know how to pronounce it, I'll just kind of give up, you kind of make the attempt. And I think we bonded over that. He said, you're up there doing that barbecue camp. I'm coming to that camp. I said, oh, you are? He said, yeah, I'm going to come. Now, we disagree about exactly what actually happened. But he came up, hung out with us, and then he said, I can come help do some more stuff for you guys. And so the best thing that's happened over this evolution, because at the early days of barbecue summer camp, we were cooking, I'm talking about we, A&M, we were cooking all the meat for any kind of thing we're doing with the briskets, pulled pork. We still cook for years a whole hog in my backyard. And we've since moved, so we kind of moved that out. But we've had Patrick Fegis that came up from Fegis Barbecue was cooked, and then had Todd David from Cadillac. Came down and cooked a whole pig for us the other day at the camp. But we were struggling because we're trying to teach everybody stuff, and then we're having to go buy the pits.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And so we were struggling. We were, our patience was bad. We were like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Can everybody come and go? It's like, and so he finally said, I tell you what, I've got a cooker. I'll bring that up. And he said, hey, what, we'll cook, you guys talk. And then he introduced John Brotherton to us. We didn't know John Brotherton, because John's doing great stuff over at Pflugerville now.
Oh yeah,
Brother barbecue, you know. And
I love John.
so all of a sudden, so our go-to people right now are Russell Wavers, and his wife Misty comes up to help, and John Brotherton, and they just come up and handle all that. I mean, they're a godsend for that.
Great, so
And
great.
you know, they've introduced, you know, all of a sudden somebody come hang out with them, and you know, it'd be some other pit master or something. So there's been a whole host of folks now that basically take a lot of the pressure off of us and let us do content, and then they're the experts, and of course they do such great work. And this has just created this magnet. So when we do Camp Brisket, we have another panel, which is the life as a pit master. And the first year we did that, we had, you know, what, 3 people that were there. And somewhere in there, you know, we got Aaron Franklin.
I was just gonna say Aaron was there. I know for one of them.
Yeah. And Aaron's been coming. Aaron was tied up this past year, couldn't come, but he's coming this next year. So he'll be there at least for the Saturday.
Yeah.
And of course, his schedule is even more complex these days. But he's enjoyed coming, and he's from this area. So, you know, his mother and father live in the Bryan College Station area.
Oh, that's
so,
right. Yeah, that is right.
Yeah, so he gets to come home and, you know, see them and then come hang out with us. So it's pretty cool. All of a sudden you walk in there and you got these people, and there's Aaron Franklin. Like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And it's like, no, man.
Doesn't Wayne come now?
And Wayne, so Wayne Miller comes over.
That's another last name that everyone pronounces incorrectly.
Yes. Well, I asked him. He said if it's a casual deal, if they say Mueller, that's fine. But if it's somebody that's supposed to have a relationship, it needs to be pronounced correctly.
Yeah, Meller.
Meller. So yeah, there's a whole host of, and so now, and of course, Miss Tootsie has come over and been on our panels, and we could just have a panel by her. I mean, we could just have a visit with Miss Tootsie, and so just the fact that she's here too. And a couple of years ago, I had a call from Terry Bexley, and he calls to Jeff, said, "Tell me more about Camp Brisket." I said, "Well, it's on something other. It's a Friday, Saturday, and of course, they're open only on Saturday, but it's the first weekend in January." And he said, "Well, we may just stay closed. We're usually closed Christmas, New Year, and we'll just close down one more week and come over there for that. Would that be fine?" I said, "It'll be great for us, but there's going to be a bunch of people that are mad. They're going to show up and you're not there. I don't care, you know, like that." And so Carrie and Miss Tootsie have been coming. Now, this next year, we've had the camps moved a little bit. It's like the second weekend in January, because it would have been January 2nd or 3rd or something like that. And we couldn't, you know, school shut down here until after, you know, we'd come back on the 2nd. And we just didn't feel like we could make that work. So we moved it up or back a week, everyone looked at that. So it's like 10th, 11th, I think it's right, 2020. And so I talked to him and said, "I don't know if that'll work for you guys." And he said, "I don't know." I said, "We may just send Miss Tootsie over there." I tell her to go over and do that if they need to work. So these camps eventually got so popular that we'd get, you know, people, it'd be like, sign up, you need to be a member or whatever it was, and then you need to go on at 10 o'clock in the morning and log in. And I had a guy, how did I get in? You know, I told him he was in his mid-60s at the time when I was probably about 60. And he said, "How did it?" I told him how to do it, all that. So, you know, the camp sign-up comes and goes, and I get a phone call from him. He said, "Jeff, I did exactly what you told me." He said, "I got on, I joined, I got on the computer at 10 o'clock in the morning. I went to the computer, I selected barbecue camp, what it was. I put it in the cart, and I get ready to go pay in the cart, and it's filled."
Like a lot of stuff, these days.
Yeah. And he said, "I'm 65. I don't think I'm going to make it." And I go like, I started having this realization. I said, "I understand that, because there are things, now I'm 65, and I think there are things in my life I'm not going to get done." It's like, well, I'm not going to get that done. It's fine. So we've hinted that we're going to have an AARP group sometime. We're in the 90s, come on in. 80s, kind of work backwards and do that. And of course, then what Foodways Texas has done is moved, and they handle all the registration stuff and all that. We do the course.
Yeah, I was going to say that if you're interested in these in both the summer camp and Camp Brisket, you need to be a member of Foodways Texas. Right? Yeah,
and it's it's not very expensive, $75.
No, it was $75. It wasn't
on that. So and there's some other good things that they're doing.
And they have a lot of events, wine events. They have lots of different things. Yeah,
Yes, and the symposia is really good too. So I mean, there's a lot of good things. So it's a pretty good investment on that.
for sure.
That's the price of a expensive brisket or something.
Yeah,
Just go ahead
it's
and
a
pick one.
meal that you'd have at a barbecue joint on a Saturday.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They have since moved to a lottery system, and so it's kind of like the lottery system that people have to go deer hunting or elk hunting somewhere. You know, there's chances put in there, and it's something. The longer you've been, you know, if you hadn't been selected for a certain length of time, whatever it is, it's just part of. And so that's made it a little bit more equitable as far as people coming. But this past year, barbecue summer camp, we had people who've been waiting 5 years to come.
Wow.
So
Okay, so it's not necessarily you're going to get in the first year.
but it's And prior to that, we had a lot of people who kept coming back, you know, and go like, "Why are you here?" So, well, I came, but my brother-in-law wanted to come with me this year or something, and they just figured out how to get, you know, registered pretty quick and things like that. And so it's like, well, somewhere in here we need to be able to have something. So now, if you've been to one, like you're not eligible for the next year or something. There's some rules and regulations like that, but. We get a lot of, you know, we got people that, again, from all over, but you'll get a lot of father, you know, son, you get, you know.
Yeah, that sounds so great to do.
All kinds of things. It's still very male dominated, and I think that's probably, you know, the interest in barbecue. It's not so we have women, but it's you know, it's still going to be 90% guys that are going to come. We always kid that how many IT people we get. Well, I was doing over or under on that, and usually it's 7 or 8 IT people. They say that, you know, there's nobody in the barbecue business that, oh boy, I get to go spend 3 days in an IT workshop.
That hasn't happened yet, but
They're loving to go someplace like a barbecue workshop or woodworking or whatever it may be.
And Daniel speaks sometimes too, right?
And usually it's around his schedule. Usually we don't get him in the June camp. There's conflicts with that, but we usually get him on Camp Brisket.
Camp Brisket, I think I saw him.
It's good to have that whole network of people that are there.
What do you think of the barbecue world that exists today? How unusual is it compared to 15 years ago or 10 years ago?
It's crazy. Who would have thought that you would have sat here and decided to teach a class to freshmen on barbecue, and that it would have opened up this whole world that is now, you know, this huge growth and stuff. I did an interview the other day with somebody and they were talking about, you know, growth and all this. They said, you know, this is so different today than what it was in the past. And I think part of it is like your efforts on having a podcast or, you know, any of those type of things, the amount of books that are available, the videos, workshops, I mean, the TV programs, all that stuff. The interest in this is so great. And I don't know that it's going to get, you know, maybe there isn't into it. I don't know. But there's no other food other than barbecue that seems to have that same type of thing. You know, I always say that there's three major food categories in Texas. You know, it's barbecue, chicken fried steak, and Tex-Mex. But nobody's standing in line for chicken fried steak and Tex-Mex. They are for barbecue. Or they're doing these journeys. You know, they'll get up on Saturday, it snows in the morning. They'll go to Louis Miller's, you know, at lunch.
And then maybe go to Brett's now.
They go to Brett's now, you know, because he's in that you know, area there in that deal. And it's not that they're engorging, but it's like they're celebrating this, and it's part of that deal. And they want to be connected. They want to be connected to the people. That's the crazy thing on this too. It's not just the barbecue.
Not at all.
The people.
And the experience.
The experience. And, you know, they're celebrities, if you think about it from that standpoint, you know, because you can see them, and of course now you can follow everybody on social media and, you know, you do stuff. So it's a crazy world, and I'm glad we're in it. I don't know what we're doing in it, but it's been.
No, you're a big part, and I've known about it from a distance, and that's why I would like to speak to you, is because I couldn't get my head around what you guys specifically were doing and where it came from, and then now it's just this whole world with there's so many festivals now. It's really, really changed, and I thought 10 years ago or 11 years ago when I started doing I had a blog and a search engine, barbecue search engine. I thought that maybe was the peak, but and then with Texas Monthly is just.
And I think the other thing that's interesting right now, there doesn't appear to be a a barrier to entry for somebody to get in this business. And if you'll talk to Brad, or if you talk to John Brotherton, any of these guys you talk to, all of a sudden, there's a crawl, walk, run mode.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, somebody like Brad's done some competition stuff and kind of, done some stuff, and then they'll kind of, oh, well, that's pretty, and then they'll do some catering kind of thing on the side.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, they'll kind of do this pop-up trailer type thing.
Exactly, yes.
That, doesn't take a huge capital expenditure on that. And then they can even have a business that might be kind of weekend oriented or something like that, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or something like that. And then you'll eventually move into some kind of bricks and mortar. Well, see, if you're in the, if you're in the chicken fried steak business, for instance, or you're in a hamburger business, you got to start off with like bricks and mortar. Start with I got to have 6 days a week or 7 days a week. I got to pay rent. I got to pay utility. I got to do, and all of a sudden,
all the insurance and all the
stuff gets to that level that if you don't succeed, that's why that failure rate is so high. I think a lot of the restaurants, it's just the capital expenditure to even get you to that point. But the guys in the barbecue business, it's almost like you say, crawl, walk, run. And then through the power of social media and such, all of a sudden somebody says, hey, have you been down the street? There's a guy's got a trailer. It's pretty good. So lines start forming, things like that. And then it's just crazy. I don't know if all this would have happened if good food would have still been found. But you go back to Aaron Franklin. Aaron Franklin's been in this 10 years. Doesn't mean he wasn't doing little odds and ends, but this is a 10-year window for him too. And again, trailer, cooking for friends.
Yeah, cooking for friends, parties,
parties, and hey, it's pretty good, and and all this, and then it gets kind of discovered. Now, if this had been 20 years ago, you wouldn't have social media. What would have exploded? Again, good food would have been found, but it would have been a lot different way, and the speed of which is so much different today with all the venues we have.
Oh yeah, and I often think of things that not everyone mimicked what Aaron was doing, but I feel like there's like a pre-Aaron and then a post-Aaron, and kind of there's a dividing line of how things kind of shifted, and it's that craft side of barbecue, or even too, like a lot of people were trimming fat they were taking all the fat off. I've talked to Tim McKeska, and he talked about how that was just, I've known him forever, and it's just interesting how people, there was a time, maybe even decades, where people weren't even eating the fat.
Well, I always talk about 21st century brisket. I kind of think about that because I think about what I grew up eating, or what I, even in this community, when you couldn't leave any fat on anything that came to plate. And we had like 3C barbecue that was here for a long time, Tom's barbecue that was here, and they were great barbecue, nothing like today's barbecue. They don't have that same deal because now bark is a component of it.
True, yeah.
Just kind of that whole thing, and the complexity of the flavors and such. But boy, there's no way in the world. They would have cooked all that stuff with fat on. They would have trimmed all the fat off and served lean, because it better be lean. And then a lot of the moist fatty cuts had to be made in chop beef, because nobody's going to take 3 slices of fatty, of the moist end. You fight for that.
Exactly.
But I think that, and so I think that whole craft thing. And it's not to say Aaron, invented all that, because there's other folks in that, but he may have helped to get that going. And then all these other people. And I think the wrapping in the peach paper and holding stuff and letting it rest and all those kinds of things, it's just been a big component. Say serving it, and then serving it hot.
For sure.
Where it's sliced on demand.
Cut to order, and that's that whole.
What we tell our students, once you cut into that, it's the meter's running. It's going to start running downhill. And so if you can serve something warm, fresh to somebody, they can eat it right there. That's brisket in its finest.
For sure.
Any of the foods, any of the meat. And, the worst stuff you have is going to a buffet line and it's been sliced and set on the steam table and all that.
And it's gray or.
And it's just bless its heart. That's just.
It does break my heart of it.
And so if you can get those, and that's fine. I think that's why you look at the top restaurants. the top places, they're almost all sliced bacon. And that's where you get the best eating experience, and that's where you get the best reviews. That's where you get the best Instagram photos. That's where
Yeah,
you get
and it
all.
just builds on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you guys have a sausage making component to them?
Yes. Well, we don't in that class, and we thought about that and whether or not we can include it, because I always think about the Texas Trinity being brisket, spare ribs and sausage and all that. But we do have a separate class we do now that is called sausage. It's called creative sausage making, and we do that the Friday, Saturday after Camp Brisket. Not that it follows; it just kind of usually fits on the calendar on that. And we've had a lot of the barbecue guys, restaurant guys, come in and take that. But it's for anybody. It's for backyard. I'd say backyard enthusiasts, but I mean that top deal. And we teach it where you can go get the grinders, stuffers from any of the places like Gander Mountain or big, Academy or someplace like that. So it isn't like you have to have $10,000 piece of equipment to do something. And people come in, and one of the things they learn about the science behind sausage making, and then they do some hands-on, and then everybody kind of splits this stuff up. And so some of it's fresh and some of it's smoked, and then you take home all this sausage. And
that's great.
It's really good. So that's a good one. So it's creative sausage making.
And that's a separate course.
That's a separate course, and we do that. That's just A&M that does that. But it's there'll be 40 people or something.
Is that something you sign up through Foodways?
No, we do that. That's through A&M.
Okay. Is that extension?
Yes.
Okay.
That's extension too. And so I think I should have a link on that on meet.tmu.edu. But
I'll make sure I put all the links.
But we'll check on that one and say, when I've been in some of the places, everybody especially in the barbecue world, they like to make their own sausage. And I've been in places where somebody will give you samples and say, well, hey, I like my brisket. Oh my gosh, mouth watering. What about my ribs? Mouth watering. Try the sausage and eat it. So what do you think? I really like your brisket. and you just can't go throw a bunch of meat together and put it in a casing and call it sausage.
No, I've had a lot of that, yeah.
You've had, and I mean, that's the place where it just, and so there's a science to how all that stuff is put together. Proteins and the meat, come to extract them to help bind and do all those kinds of things. And
what works, what doesn't work, yeah.
There's a method to that. And so just having a bunch of trimmings and just kind of grind them up and season them, put them in the smoke and expect that they're not going to fat out, do all kinds of stuff.
Gummy or, yeah.
So there's a little bit about how to do that. And especially
that's great.
Making something out of like all brisket. Brisket needs to be cooked that long, low, slow type thing to get the collagen in it to become gelatin. And so, it's hard to do that in a normal kind of a cooking process for sausage without it finally getting to be gelatin, and then you got this gel blob and things like that. So
it's an art. It's sausage and really good. And that's one thing that I lived in Texas for a year, and living in California, you really can't get great sausage out here, like Texas style sausage that you can go to a grocery store at HEB and get really good, much better sausage than you can get in California now. There's some guys there's some barbecue places that are making their own sausage from scratch, and it's delicious, but they care about what they're doing, and they've learned how to do it properly.
Yes.
But there's something about really great sausage. Oh.
Well, I do want to go back and visit about our freshman class. Sure. And that since this fall is the 10th year anniversary of that. And that's what got us started. But when we started on that, the university would sign up. We had like 15 people on the spot. It was open to anybody in the university that come in. We have freshmen on campus right now because it's summertime. They're coming in and going through new student conference, and they're registering and things like that. And so all these classes that were available, and there were 70 of them at that time, they just try to get students stuck into various these little 1 hour classes. Some of them were graded, some of them weren't graded. It was just kind of fun. And we'd go to workshops, and they'd always tell us, which one are you going to do? The Texas barbecue, everybody, I want to come to that. But they had all kinds. I often think after doing this, you go back and rename all the classes you teach and have good, sexy names. There was one of them, one class that was like chemistry and murder. Well, gosh, what is that? Well, it was all the crime stuff. It was all the, how does, cyanide kill you? Well,
yeah.
Like CIS type deal,
Uh-huh.
one of those kinds of programs, and you imagine students having a lot better, appreciation instead of boring kind of stuff. But about 3 or 4 years into this, the university decided to stop this program, and so we were kind of left hanging. And so we said, "Well, we quit doing this because we've had such good luck with it." So we ended up creating our own class in the same model, but we named it. It's Animal Science 117,
Okay.
Texas Barbecue, and it was designed for freshmen, incoming freshmen only.
Okay.
Seniors will find the class. I don't want to come back. No, it's for freshmen because it's helping them make the transition from high school to college. Fast forward where we are today, we'll have 30 students in there, so we've up from the 15, and we'll kind of add them one at a time. We try to find students that are out of state because they're not going in the classes at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon.
So you got to be dedicated.
And nobody cuts, like that. And then with it being during football season, you already got 7 home games, so that kind of fits into kind of tailgate thing.
Yeah.
And we're also trying to find students, maybe first generation college students, because they're going to need a little more hand holding and things like that. So it's about barbecue, but it's also about community. So it's about building community of these freshmen come in. And then we have people that were freshmen that are now sophomores that help, and now juniors and now seniors. So these 30 freshmen, we end up having about 30 helpers that are sophomores, juniors, and seniors, plus a grad student. So
that community.
It's a community. And then that's the group when we go to Texas Monthly or Houston Barbecue Festival or anything, or we need to do a program on campus. It's the Texas Barbecue teaching assistants that help us. And these people, somebody said, "How many pitmasters have you trained?" I said, "None." That's not our purpose.
Yeah.
We got people who've been to, we got veterinarians, we have medical doctors now, we have lawyers, we have all kinds of people in all walks of life. In the 10-year time period, as I keep up with people about what they're doing.
Yeah.
But, so what we try to do is say, they're used to help with the, set up, clean up, serving, but a whole lot of the teaching assistants are there. "How are you doing this week?" "Oh, I'm really struggling with chemistry." "Boy, I struggle too. Have you thought about going to this tutor? Have you done this?" I'm from there. And so it's a great opportunity for our freshmen to be mentored. Then as they move up, and, we'll have the 30 will turn to 15. We'll have 15 that move on and do something else, and that's good. But we say, you have been served as a freshman. Now your job as a sophomore is to serve. That's been fun, and it's been rewarding. I tell everybody, I said, I know I'm in the 4th quarter of my career. I just don't know if I'm in this 2-minute warning.
Let's hope not.
But I've really enjoyed this last 10 years that we've found this barbecue community, and it's kind of, all the craziness with it. But it met so many wonderful people that you name on a first-name basis.
Yeah.
And then all these students that come through here that, they get kind of pulled in because they get to eat great barbecue each week. But it's the fact that we get a chance to know them and help them, mentor them through their time that they're here. And we have these connections that go long after they're gone.
And it's almost like that. It's almost the way it is how people are jumping into the barbecue world to create that community and family. You've created that within Texas A&M, which is fabulous. And it shows what barbecue does. It cuts across everything.
Yeah. It's kind of like you come from barbecue, it's like, it's kind of like.
Great. Well, Jeff, we've talked for an hour, and I could talk for another hour. I don't know how long people have for attention spans these days, but I feel like we've learned so much, and I can't thank you for what you're doing and what your team and your staff, it's like the rest of the professors are doing. I think that it's God's work. It's so important. I think and it's so Texas, and it's amazing how Texas barbecue too has spread across the United States, that passion for it, and like restaurants. And I appreciate what you've done, and thank you for taking the time sitting there and talking to a guy in California all about this. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's good to visit with you, and look forward to this work and then your future podcast.
Yeah. And I can't wait to visit you, and I can't wait to next week.
And hope we'll see you at Camp Brisket.
I hope so too. I'm fingers crossed, and I'll run across you some way in Texas when I go back to Texas. But I'm hoping to sign up for everything and get a chance to go.
Good, very good.
Well, thank you. Have a great week. Yeah, thank you. Have a great weekend, and good luck with everything. And I'll talk to you very soon.
Okay. Bye.